Hello everyone to Fungi Finders. Today we're out and about a little bit away from Ipswich. We went to the Wenham Gordon College, which has these wonderful ponds, and there's a whole network of trails that you can go and explore. You can come on the bikes with the kids. It's super family friendly, walking around, and it's miles and miles that actually connect to the Tobacco Road trails up on the other side of the pond right there somewhere. So we're going to go and explore what mushrooms are there out here. We had tons of rain, as you might have noticed, right? Some floodings, not in Massachusetts, but up in New Hampshire. But we had lots of rain and lots of hot and humid weather, which is great for mushrooms. So come with me and we're going to explore some local mushrooms and some great edibles. So right here, even before we went on a trail, there's a great hill which has lots of great mushrooms growing on it usually every season. There's enough rain. We found little tiny specimens of something called bicolor bolete or Biorangia bicolor bolete. And this one is very interesting because it has a yellow underside. You can see the kind of patterns on the stem. They're kind of red color. The cap is beautiful as well, kind of a velvety red. It can change the color with the sun, obviously, if it's exposed to the sun. And this one is interesting because one of the signs of the IDs is if you scrape the surface of the pores, they will turn kind of a bluish greenish color. It might take a little bit, but it eventually definitely turns blue, and that's one of the ID features. If you can see that, it's turning darker. And if we slice it open, this mushroom, you're going to see the ratio of the mushroom inside. Different mushrooms, especially the boletes, have a different ratio of the flesh of the mushroom, which is the meat of the mushroom, right? And this one has a only tiny layer of the tubes. That's where the spores are at the bottom of it. And that should be only the layer that actually changes blue. It's hard to see on this one since it's so small. These bicolor boletes have a very lemony flavor to them, not kind of a creamy mushroom flavor that you might be used to maybe to the with the mushrooms, but they're very lemony, and I think they're great in like a veggie soup or stir fry. And they also keep very well when you dehydrate them. I was told the longer you keep them, the better flavor they develop. So I like to collect these, dehydrate them, and just store them in glass jars and keep them for a while with me. And also another thing about the bicolor bolete is, again, you see the bruising here also on the stem, and here's the little tiny guy. They sometimes grow quite bigger. I found some a couple years ago. They were the size of like a platter, and they usually stay very nice. The bugs don't get into them unless they've been sitting there for a very long time. So we're going to take this one with us and we can dehydrate it and add them to other mushrooms that we found. Let's go. Here, just before the start of the woods, we came across a little small Amanita, which is the group or family of mushrooms that has the biggest amount of deadly, toxic, and poisonous mushrooms. So it's great to know what to watch out for when you're going into the woods and look at the mushrooms that you should not be touching. Well, you can touch them, but you should definitely not be consuming. Here we go. There's the Amanita, which is quite fresh. It's got a tightly packed gills and they're all white. Then we have a little tiny bit of leftover from the skirt and the ring that's attached still. These are very fragile, so they might come off like with just a blow of the wind and just a little touch of human hands or even animals, right? Or in the rain. And the other feature ID for all the Amanitas is little leftover vulva of the egg. This one is very small, and we'll probably find a bigger one, but there is definitely an egg where the Amanita was starting from when it was little. And on the top, the little tiny white specks are called warts, and that is the leftover from the original veil that was covering the whole egg when the mushroom was growing down in the ground. And these also come up very easily with the rain. They wash off away or with the wind. So some Amanitas will have these warts and some will not. But this is the really, really big group of mushrooms that you should all know as a beginners. And this year they have been out everywhere, lots of different types. There's a blusher Amanita that we'll show you a little bit later on. Those grow quite big. Then obviously there is a destroying angel Amanita, which is all white. Then we have a death cap Amanita. And Amanitas, I was told, are very drought resistant. So last year, even though we had a drought, there was still lots of Amanitas out there. So these are kind of meant to survive harsh conditions. And one more thing that you can see on the Amanita is the way the gills are attached to the stem, or the stipe, I should say. The different types of attachments, they can be attached or free or not attached. They can be kind of notched at the end, and all that information will be in all of your field guides for all the mushrooms, not just Amanitas. So I'll leave this one here, and animals might eat it. Just because animals eat it, though, don't think that humans can eat it. That is a kind of an old tale that people maybe have told themselves. So let's move on and we'll find some more mushrooms. Here, still in the same spot, kind of in the woods, we found another mushroom, which is part of the group of bolete mushrooms. If you look at the boletes, all the boletes have on the bottom, on the underside of the mushroom, the sponge texture. This one has released the spores a little bit because it changed the color. When they're starting out, they're usually white, and when they release the color, they kind of turn different colors, yellow. This one is kind of like a blush color pale, and it should turn pink when you squeeze it a little bit, which lots of mushrooms do. And this one has a very velvety cap, very soft, kind of like a suede, I would say. And to some people it might look really beautiful and delicious and edible, but this one should be one of the bitter boletes. If you slice it off and you take a little tiny piece of it, it's called chew and spit test, and this one is completely bitter. So there's been tons and tons of mushrooms out there. Most of them are with the brown reticulation that you can see on a stem. Looks like a fishnet or like a netting, but it's brown colored. And based on that brown reticulation and also the pink staining and the way the mushroom looks, this is the bitter bolete that you don't want to eat, just because it's really gross. So take a gum with you into the woods, or Tic Tac if you have one of these. They're really, really, really bitter. And they look beautiful, but not edible. I got this one with a piece of soil on it too. This is a very beautiful mushroom that is not that easy to find, well, especially for me, I would say. It's called bolete, again, because it does have a sponge texture on the bottom that I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to clean it off a little bit. I didn't mean to grab the whole thing like this, but here we go. It's another type of bolete that is called Frost's bolete, and this one is very cool because you can see a little kind of a liquid, golden color liquid that's oozing from the side, but also from the undercap, if you can see the golden droplets. So this is the kind of a unique bolete for me to find. As I said, it's called Frost's bolete. You see the special kind of deep ridges or deep pockets almost like on the stem. It's not smooth like other mushrooms or the ones that we just saw before, right? It was all brown, and this is bright yellow color. And on the underside, which might be very hard to see, but there are little tiny droplets of kind of a golden liquid that oozes out of the mushrooms. And the cap for this one is also colored, I would call candy apple, right? Some people call it candy apple bolete. And we'll put the exact scientific name on the screen as usual. And if you slice it open, you can see the inside that might change the color. And you can see again the flesh of the mushroom, right? The meat, the top. And then this layer of the tubes is a little bit bigger than in the bicolor bolete that we just saw earlier. And it's changing the color slowly, kind of to the blue hue. But this is a treat to find. I love the texture on the stem. And I think I found this one here a couple years ago, and now it's back with all the rain that we had. So I'm going to take it home and study a little bit more. It's very beautiful, and it does smell very differently than other mushrooms. It has kind of a citrusy smell to it, which lots of mushrooms do. They have their unique smells. I think we talked about that before. So that might be a good thing to study or look up in some of your field guides if you got them. Another great find that we have here along the trail is something called a group of mushrooms called Lactarius or milky caps, because when you cut these, I'm going to clean up my knife. When you cut these, the group of milky caps oozes different colored liquid, a milk or latex. Obviously it's not a milk, but you can see how it oozes out of the mushroom. And it can be white, the milk can turn brown. There's also a group of mushrooms that oozes blue milk, purple colored milk, and some blue milk later turns into the green one. And this one specific one, it is called milky cap, and it's the peppery one. So if you take a little bite of it and you look at just tiny bit, It gives you really, really kind of a bitter and peppery flavor. Not spicy like hot peppers, but spicy as a pepper that you would chew into. As you can see, all these milky caps are going to ooze the milk / latex liquid out of them. And some of it might stain your hands like brown, but not all of them. Some of these can get quite big. This one is kind of a mid-size, I would say. But here we have an old one that was much bigger. They can be like the size of a big, maybe like a cereal bowl. Bunch of them, I saw them, and they're very, very common in the area. And they're not considered toxic or anything, but they're just not really edible because the way they taste. Although some people do dehydrate them and they grind them up into the powder and use them as a kind of a pepper seasoning, if they're crazy enough to try that, or if they like that kind of a food. So. On the other side of the same place, we found another group of milky caps as well. These are much more delicious, not spicy at all. You can ID them based on their little kind of a fuzzy, soft texture on the top. The color is kind of pale orange brownish. And as you can maybe see and compare the mushrooms that we saw before, the peppery mushroom had really, really packed gills. These are much more widely spaced. Also, if you notice, some of the gills are coming from the inside, but there's also a whole set of kind of in-between gills on the edge, and they're just very short if we do a close-up on that. So that's one of the other ID features. This one is still oozing the milk, if you can see. They're little droplets of the liquid, and it comes right out when you cut it. And these are delicious edibles. It's the milky cap mushroom, and we're going to put exact scientific name on the screen. And there's lots of them right now. You might find them in the woods or just on the hills, in the lawn, or if you find them in the moss, like we found them here, a whole group. And of course, before you consume anything, make sure you have an ID 100%, beyond 100% by a live person or someone that you trust and know, so you don't get something that is not edible for you. Also, the stem is kind of particularly colored. You see how the gills are kind of attached just at the top. They don't go any further down the stem, and they're also attached just by the edge of the gills, I would say. For some gills we attach kind of at the bigger portion. And this one would be great to bake and enjoy with some pasta or something. These are called eyelash cup fungi, and if you look very closely on the edge of the actual cup, you will see little eyelashes. They come in many colors. They're not edible, but I think they're always fun to look at. They have tiny lashes on the edge. They can be bright red color. Those I think are out a little bit earlier in the season, and they will usually be growing on the rotting wood or the sticks and stuff like that. If you find a close-up image, it would be great to see. And they're just kind of flat. There's a whole group of mushrooms called cup fungi that look like a little cups, or kind of like a goblets when they have a little different shape. And on these, the spores are on the inside of the cup, actually. Here, if I can get it out, we have a choice edible. And the choice edible in Myco world means really, really delicious mushrooms that everyone wants to find. And this one, based on the shape, you might have guessed or might know already, it's called black trumpet. There's nothing else out there in the woods that looks like this. They're trumpet-shaped mushrooms. They have an actual hole in the side, right? And the spores on these mushrooms are actually on the outside of the mushroom. If you can tell, maybe with a close-up, they're kind of pale pink or orange colored spores if you would do spore print on this particular one. Black trumpets are wonderful, delicious, edible, super easy and great to ID for any beginner. They can range, the colors can range anywhere from brownish to grayish color all the way to the black. The sizes can vary. Some of them can be the size of your hand, literally. And we have some big specimens here growing right on the moss. They love the areas where the water gathers, like on the side of the trails or the vernal pools. And you have to look very carefully for them. They look like old wrinkled up leaves. But when you find one, you will find many, many of them. And there's another tip for the black trumpets. the more mosquitoes and the greater humidity there is out there, the more black trumpets you'll probably find. So this time of the year will be time to go out and look for them. Here we have a great special specimen of edible mushroom that lots of people overlook. This one is called by its common name, Old Man of the Woods. This is something we used on a cooking show for the ICAM with Old Grumpy Man Cooking. It's not a bolete family type of a mushroom. You can see on the bottom a little bit crawling around, but you can also see a sponge texture on the mushroom where the spores are, right? You can see little holes. And this one looks kind of funky and weird, but it's still in a good shape. And as I said, it's a bolete family. The texture is very different to any mushrooms that you might have seen. It's kind of like a fuzzy animal. It's got these little scabs, but they're really very fuzzy, almost like a blanket kind of a type of a texture on it. And also the stem is furry too, I would say. Has a little texture that is very soft and not mushy at all. And this one, despite the way it looks, it's a great edible to slice up and dehydrate and throw it in with maybe some other boletes that you might have found. It's probably the biggest specimen of the Old Man of the Woods that I ever found, with the help of Randall from the ICAM and with her keen eyes. One more other thing for the Old Man of the Woods is, I'm going to slice this one open. I don't want to, but I do want to show you what happens. Lots of boletes will change a color when you slice them open. And this one is going to turn slowly orange or red. Do you see how the flesh is changing a color? And you can see that this is actually a beautiful mushroom. There's no bugs, no any things crawling through it inside of the meat. So you could definitely slice this one up and dehydrate it and use it in your cooking. And here you can see wonderfully the color changing properties, right? When exposed to the oxygen, the Old Man of the Woods will slowly turn kind of a brick color or orange or reddish color, which is very beautiful. Oops. But this one, because it has the vulva and the skirt again, is not the spring mushroom, it's type of Amanita. You can see the skirt or the veil on it that can super easily peel off. It just comes off super easily. There's some kind of a creature eating it. And here we have the vulva or the egg. And again, you see the little tiny warts on the top that come up very easily. But there's still little kind of a specks that you can see on the top of it. So this is definitely Amanita. The pure white gills, the vulva, and the skirt that we just took off. It's one of the many Amanitas that you can find in New England. We have tons of these. Here we have something very beautiful, and lots of kids like this because it looks exactly like the tiger's eye, the gem. And if you turn the mushroom very slowly, you can see the little hair on it and how it kind of changes the color. You can see the glistening, kind of like the gem. So a tiger's eye from the side view, and then if you look at the bottom, you will see the texture where the spores are released from the pores. Sorry. These are very, very common. They're growing on the moss usually, and they have a kind of a fibrous stem, so there's nothing to really eat. But if you, as I said, if you feel the top, you'll feel the fuzzy hair, and lots of mushrooms will have this texture kind of on the top, which sounds strange or funny, but a turkey tail, which is a great medicinal mushroom, has the little fuzzy texture on the top, the tiger's eye, and also some other mushrooms that you might see in the woods. Not to be overlooked, I would say, and we have a bunch of them growing here on the side of the trail on the moss. So they're very fun to look at and also collect for some people. Some people like to dehydrate them and dry them and maybe make like a jewelry out of it. I saw some earrings that people make out of these because they're so pretty. So if you're into that kind of stuff, making jewelry with the mushrooms, you should go out and find a tiger's eye. It looks kind of funny, almost like a cordyceps mushroom that you might have heard about in a certain show where the mushrooms were attacking humans. But this is something called, by its common name, earth tongue, because it kind of looks like a little tongue sticking out of earth. And I've not seen these prior to this season, and right now they seem to be coming out really in the moss. I see a bunch here and along the other places. So they're not very big. Kind of a cordyceps kind of a shape to it, and it does look like an earth tongue. So again, nothing to eat, but maybe fun to look at or discover with the kids.
Wow.
It's a beautiful specimen of another type of bolete, which we have a really, really huge variety in New England. The color, the top of the cap, it's kind of a brick color red, very beautiful. And here we have the underside, which again has the sponge texture, and you can see the the yellow kind of rim on the edge. And I'm gonna slice the bottom, and I really want to do one thing. As we said, many boletes change a color when you cut them, when you bruise them or slice them, and this one is doing the same thing. And I'm gonna try to be quick because it's already turning blue. Look at that. So this one, unlike the Old Man of the Woods, is turning blue with the exposure to the oxygen. And it's quite fast, as you can see. And I know these bluing boletes in Europe are sometimes huge delicacy, but I try to stay away from them for any beginners. But it's always definitely fun to see in person how fast they can turn blue with the oxygen exposure. And on some boletes, as you might tell, only the part of the stem or stipe will turn blue. Sometimes it's only the tubes or the spores, and sometimes it's only the flesh. And all this information is usually included in the field guides, and you should study that very carefully. But it's very beautiful, as you can see, as a specimen that we found in the woods. Really lovely. Okay, we did find what we have been looking for. Aside from black trumpets, we have another great edible type of a mushroom, which are called chanterelles, which are very distinctive by where they grow and what they look like. So the chanterelle ID feature is that they always grow out of the ground, unlike their look-alike jack-o'-lantern, which grows out of the wood. So chanterelles will be always kind of scattered on the ground, and you can see them right there by the tree in the moss, just starting up. But these were right there in the leaf pile, I would say. So they grow always out of the ground. Also, if you look very closely at their gills, the gills look more like wrinkles. They're not the thin blades that you see on the other mushrooms, right? They look more like wrinkled, kind of old apple. And the gills also go just a little bit, tiny bit down at the top of the stem or stipe, right? They are not chopped off right at the top. And another ID feature, which I'm not sure if we can do it on this one because they're so small, but when you take apart the chanterelle, it should come apart kind of as a string cheese, right? That's the texture of their stem or stipe. It's not really dense, it's kind of a string cheese-like. And they should be white inside, which I know is hard to see on these, but if you find some fresher ones that are not a little bit wet from the water, they'll be definitely white inside, and they have the stringy cheese texture to the stipe. And if you have enough of them in your hands, they should smell very fruity. You need at least like 4 or 5, right? But these are delicious edibles, and there's many colors of them, starting with the yellow, the same color as my rain jacket, all the way to the maybe cinnabar, cinnamon curl-like. They're also winter chanterelles that have a yellow foot. They're called yellow foot. The foot is bright yellow, and the top of the underside of the cap is kind of a greenish color. So these are great edibles to go along with some black trumpets that we found. And I feel like they're very slow growers because I have a patch, and it takes like 2 weeks for them to grow big for me to collect them. But they're very delicious, and I think they're great fresh. I do not like dehydrate chanterelles. I think put them in like a fresh soup, or maybe fresh scrambled eggs, or fresh on a pizza, and then bake the pizza, obviously. Don't eat the raw mushrooms, but they're very, very good as fresh mushrooms. One, and then I'll pick the other one, but I'm pretty sure this is the almond scented one. I wanted to show you another type of Arusula that you might come across. This one is not reddish or pink hue, but it's still Arusula just because of the white stem. This is actually like double stem, twins, or like legs. But it's got the white stem stipe, and the gills are very tightly packed, and you can see how they're white on the inside, right? And they kind of all look the same from far away. This might be something called, it's hard to tell because it's a little bit old, but there is one Rusula that is called almond scented Rusula, which smells like a marzipan. If you find it fresh, it will be this kind of a pale brownish yellow color. And just give it a sniff and see if you think that it smells like marzipan. Fun to look at, not really to eat. And there's lots of different types of russulas in our area. Some of the red ones are toxic, and I know that some people from Europe come to New England and they want to eat the russulas, but in Europe I don't think they have that many toxic ones as we do here in New England. So if you come across some red russulas and you're not familiar with them, I would just toss them, because the only way really to tell what you have with the red russula is if you do DNA sequencing on it. So we'll toss this one. Okay. So I only picked the bigger guy that we have right here, another bolete family. It's been eaten by something, but that's fine. We see the sponge texture on the bottom, always a bolete, right? And then we see the cap, which is kind of more like a chestnut brownish color. It's still very velvety, not slimy at all, because there are some mushrooms that are bolete family and they're called slippery jacks, and they're very, very slimy. And those are kind of a choice edible in Europe, not that much in the United States or New England, I would say, but definitely edible ones in Europe. This is not the slippery jack though, it's all very dry. And I think this one is not going to turn any color either when they slice it open. And despite the fact that it was kind of eaten on the bottom, the inside of the mushroom is really beautiful, kind of pristine. So this bolete could also be dried, and as long as it doesn't taste bitter, which it doesn't, then you can dehydrate it and add it to some of your dishes. And it's very pretty. There's a whole bunch of them that are just starting to grow, and it's kind of a season for the boletes now in New England, so you can spot many of these out there. So on this tree, oh my God, it's a type of a conifer, I believe, that it's probably dying and being decomposed. We found another type of a milky cap, which kind of looks similar to the one that we saw before, but this one has you see the little tiny nipple at the top, which will be definitely an ID feature in your field guide if you will look at the mushroom that has that kind of a structure to the top. And also, as you can see, the gills compared to the other milky caps that we found are more of a brown color, I would say, but it should still ooze the liquid if you cut it. Some liquid that comes out of the milky caps, certain milky caps, is white. This one, I believe, should be kind of pale white. Kind of, you can see little droplets forming there. This is a mushroom that's a little past prime, but great to see and study. It will fall apart on me. This is something called Amanita rubenescens, which is blushing or blusher Amanita. You can see the warts on the top that we talked about so many times. These don't come off so easily. They're kind of more robust, and rubenescens or the blusher Amanita can be very, very big. And if you rub it like this, it will change the blush pink color. Also, the gills with the H will turn that same color, so that's the ID feature. And you can see how super, super tightly packed those gills are. Really, really tightly packed, and they're kind of notched at the end where the stem or the stipe is attached to them. Again, Amanita does have the skirtle ring. It's kind of falling apart here on me, but it also has the vulva. Here's the leftover egg, and has the attached mycelium on the bottom. This is where the egg kind of starts. And these have been out in huge, great numbers. We found this wonderful little spot with different types of trees. I think we have a hemlock, maybe, a conifer next to the, what is that? That looks like something, I can't really tell, but there's like 3 different types of trees, and we have all this moss. So if you come across the area like this, you might find a great variety like we did. If you look down here, the yellow ones are all Amanitas. Then we have some beautiful, really large russula, kind of a pink, orange color, pink color, I would say, very pretty. More Amanitas. And here we have little tiny baby boletes just starting out. Well, here's the bolete, that one, which might be possibly porcini based on my taste test. We will let them grow a little bigger, come back in a couple days. And on the other side, there's more porcini, and further back we have Amanitas. So mushrooms have this relationship with many trees, and if you know what trees to look for and what are the relationships, then you can find the mushrooms that you might want to find. So here we have another little specimen of chanterelles, and you might be able to see much better what I was talking about, the wrinkled gills and the orange color, and also kind of little indentation in the middle. They kind of sink in. So if they're bigger, these mushrooms, they would kind of form a little funnel shaped like structure, almost like a black trumpet, but not that big, and their whole inside would not be happening, right? The black trumpets are hollow on the inside, but not these. So they're just growing on a little patch of moss here. And as I said, they're very slow growers in my mind. So you have to come back maybe like in 10 days and they might be bigger if anyone doesn't pick them before you. But they're very delicious and I highly recommend them. I know some stores now sell them. They're usually imported from the West Coast because they have a much bigger variety there. But these are delicious too, into anything you want to eat. Before we left, we had to stop by because this is another specimen of that mushroom that we saw all the way at the beginning, the bolete. And you see how different this can be. It was standing in the sun for a while, so it's not red anymore. It's kind of a brownish color. But you see the texture on the stem. It's just very kind of shaggy with the little cavities in between, right? The cap is not very big. There's probably not much water here anymore under the mulch, but it's just beautiful. The texture on the stem is very specific to this type of a bolete, and we're going to put in the scientific name on the screen for you, obviously. We came to the end of our walk for today. We started at the Gordon College, and further down to my right side there's the Tobacco Road trails that are very beautiful as well. We found tons of great edibles, and I think there are more coming up with more rain. I will be signing off with the Fungi Finders, but you should send us any pictures of the mushrooms that you would like to ID for us or help you IDing for that for you. We can also reach out back to you, of course, with the identification, and I'll be doing a walk this weekend for the Ipswich Library, which is completely sold out, but the library already booked a fall walk as well, and all of that stuff will be probably posted online. So if you would like to join any of my walks, watch out for the schedule, and you can contact us via ICAM. Have a wonderful day.